This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Wednesday, October 31st, 2018, and my guest is no other than Ricky Villacrez of GSMArena. Hi, Ricky, how are you?
How's it going, Miriam? Great to have me here. It's really awesome to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so it's been kind of a crazy week. I just saw you in New York City. We're back at our respective homes because OnePlus.
Because OnePlus and countless other events that happened throughout the month, yes.
Yeah, well, we've seen each other a few times. The big news this week, obviously, and we're going to cover all of it, is the OnePlus 6T announced. And more importantly, what's great about this phone is that it's available on a US carrier for the first time. So let's talk about that in depth. And then, and I have a unit, and I know that Ricky doesn't, but Ricky was there and did, play with it, etc. And then Apple did a whole bunch of stuff the next day. I wasn't there for that, but there's some really interesting things we should talk about there. And then I want to also talk about this other phone that has been hyped to death, right, Ricky? What is that?
That's the red Hydogen. Is it called the Hydogen One?
One, yeah. Hydogen One. No, that's cool. I mean, everybody knows this Red only has really one phone at this point, and it's a bit of a disaster. So it's very rare that reviewers have to give a phone like a 2 or 3 out of 10. And this is one of those situations. So, anyway, so let's get started. I think that I want your initial thoughts. Like, you were at the event, and I like the fact that, in fact, you didn't get a review in advance, because you really kind of had raw feelings about it when you got there and got to play with it. So what are your thoughts on the OnePlus 6T, knowing all the history of OnePlus?
So my first impression was that the midnight black, that satin finish. Was that the same finish they had in the 6? Like, did it have that swirl in there?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, so that's just my own ignorance. No, I had the mirror OnePlus 6, so I didn't know what the matte one looked like. That's fine. So actually, with this OnePlus 6T launch, this was really when I asked myself, why is OnePlus still releasing these incremental updates? I thought personally that there was not too much updated on this phone. But okay, they launched it on T-Mobile.
Correct. And so it's kind of a cool, this is how daft and slow I am sometimes, Ricky. I was like, why the 6T? Like, it's kind of odd that they would do it on kind of like the TikTok cycle, where their TikTok cycle is 6 months, right? Tick is the big number change in the spring. And then in the fall, you get the T version, which is kind of like the TikTok. And
I like that.
And I was like, why would they do it on the talk cycle? That's so weird. And then I thought about it a bit more, and I was like, well, it's probably because, catching up on those holiday sales, that's a good time to like hype a phone. Except technically, Apple does all their phone launches in the fall as well. So, and obviously it's beneficial to them, as we've seen. But then it took me a while to realize that the 6T, the letter T, was such a perfect fit for T-Mobile. I don't think it was on purpose, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it just fits.
OnePlus 6T Mobile.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love how Enobong at Board at Work was on his video was saying 60, like the number is 60.
The 60 is Sessi.
It was awesome. So anyway, so what, okay, so let's talk about T-Mobile. Let's get that out of the way, because that's obviously a huge deal. OnePlus has sold their phones for a while now in the US on their website. And, you could also buy them on Amazon and other places, not officially, but you could get them. And,
sure.
And that was kind of the thing, their audience was a tech savvy early adopter audience. And they were like, okay, let's make this available for them. Legitimate, with support and a warranty and everything through our website, and make them happy, and then they can take that to their carrier of their choice, meaning basically AT&T or T-Mobile, because it was a GSM device, so it didn't support Verizon or Sprint, didn't have CDMA bands, And it wasn't, on Verizon, you have to be approved by Verizon to be on their LTE network, which is a crock of crap because really part of their license for LTE requires them to allow unlocked devices on their LTE network. So I always find it interesting that they make such a fuss that they have to certify phones. But anyway, and so this phone is coming to T-Mobile, but it's also going to work on Verizon for the first time on only LTE. So you won't be able to use it on legacy Verizon networks. Like no CDMA support, so you have to be in LTE land. But obviously Verizon is LTE land pretty much everywhere. And to do voice calls and texting, it uses voice over LTE. And so it's certified by Verizon this time. So that's a big deal. Of course, Sprint customers are still SOL because they still use CDMA a lot and they have weird LTE bands. So the reality is now you can buy a phone unlocked from OnePlus. And if you buy the unlocked version, it's dual SIM. And then you can buy a phone from T-Mobile. And so, Ricky, did you catch the differences between the two? There are differences.
I understand that the T-Mobile version is locked to T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, it's locked to T-Mobile, and it has extra bands for T-Mobile, the 600 megahertz band, which is the I forgot what it's, band 71, I believe? Band 71 or 72.
So it turns out that actually that's not true. The 600 band was like, it has the same bands as the one they sell for the US unlocked, but T-Mobile in their this marketing speak, it's optimized for T-Mobile bands, which just means it supports 600. So there's no difference there. The big difference is it's single SIM.
Yes, that is the biggest difference. It's single SIM, and is the unlocked one the one that's, well, obviously the unlocked one has to be the one that works on Verizon. The dual SIM one works on Verizon.
So both of them do.
Oh, both of them do. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like in terms of radio, they're the same. Just one. So we're not sure. I haven't seen a T-Mobile one, so I don't know how they disabled the second SIM. If it's just a different SIM slot, like where you have like the second part is covered over, right? You can't you can't physically put a SIM in there.
Oh, I see.
Or if it's a software disable, and you still have a tray with two SIMs, we'll have to figure that out. Because if it's a software disable, there's a good chance that you might be able to reflash your
it's a
phone.
different SKU. So it might it might not even have a second IMEI number.
So here's the thing. Exactly. That's why reflashing might be needed. And then you're still SOL because you don't have any MEI. But here's the thing that I think is happening. It's only a different SKU because the box also says T-Mobile on it on the outside. I saw the box at the T-Mobile store. Okay. And then also because it's locked, right? They have to lock it in the factory. And then because, and I have a feeling that the SIM tray is different, which is actually really justifies them having a different SKU, right? But what if you can reflash this thing and somehow there's an IMEI in there that's just not visible to you, that's still there, baked in, that you can access all of a sudden, and maybe you just have to buy a new SIM tray. It'll be interesting. That's my point. We don't have the answers, but here's the thing that you should know. You have to get it unlocked if you buy it from T-Mobile. Now, if you are a T-Mobile customer and you buy it from them, after 40 days of service in good standing, you can get it unlocked. They send you, you run their unlock app, which you can download on the Play Store, which I think is probably baked into the phone, and you can unlock it. But the challenge is that if you're already a customer and you're already in good standing, you technically couldn't unlock it right away. And apparently, don't quote me on this, but I heard someone at T-Mobile tell me, and I can't, say who, but that if you go to a store and you buy one full price, and there's a $40 unlocking fee, you can unlock it on the spot.
Oh, okay.
But that's because they want to make money from you, right? Because you're not going to be on their network, so they want so that's actually more money than buying it from OnePlus on their website, and you don't get dual SIM. And let's talk about firmware in a second. And there's different firmware, and I'll get to that because that's the worst part, in my opinion. And then, of course, that means you can have it right away because you can walk into the store in Times Square because of the first 3 days, starting Monday. Was it Monday?
Oh, it was the first 3 days.
What's that?
I thought it was just the first day. I didn't know that they were holding it continuously.
I thought it was 3 days. That it was
I didn't know.
Only available at that store. And then after that, other stores would get it. But and then of course I think it gets sold. Then it's available on the. I mean, it's available on the OnePlus site now. It doesn't ship for not. It's going to take a while to get to you. But I mean, these are some of the things that I should look up. I don't know. But the point is, look, listeners, dear listeners, if you want this phone, do me a favor, wait and buy it from. Or even if you can pre-order it right now, pre-order it from OnePlus. Don't get it through T-Mobile. Here's why, right? It is essentially the same phone, but the firmware has been what I call contaminated by T-Mobile, meaning there is apps on there from T-Mobile you cannot remove, including the T-Mobile app, their account app, and their weird caller ID app. And I think you can remove that one, and probably the unlock app. Which is, you're going to say that's very minimal. But if you look, a Pixel 3 bought from Verizon, once you get it unlocked, or it should be unlocked, there was this brouhaha about that, but the bottom line is easy to get unlocked, and it doesn't have any Verizon software contaminating its ROM, as far as I know. So I'm a little miffed and annoyed that T-Mobile forced OnePlus to sell their soul and make a custom firmware version, because the big question, Ricky, is, and I think you know what I mean here, updates. Are they going to get updates at the same time?
So once the carrier is involved, yeah, it's pretty much up in the air whether the carrier is going to be able to keep up with the general release of a worldwide update, in this case, in the international unlocked version. So, T-Mobile customers might get updates, a week, maybe even a month later than the general release. I mean,
they're promising all kinds of things. When I talk to the OnePlus and the T-Mobile people at their event, they're like, yeah, don't worry, we're going to be on time with the updates. But I'm like, how is that going to work? Because, you need to push them through your server. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's pushed to OnePlus servers. I don't know. The bottom line is there are too many question marks, and I don't think you should make that compromise. Unless you're absolutely on a budget and you cannot afford to buy this full price, I would say buy the unlocked version. It'll work just fine on T-Mobile. And, I'm using my review unit, which is a dual SIM unlocked version on T-Mobile, and it works great. I got 600 megahertz support. Everything is awesome. Well, VoLTE is working. Wi-Fi calling is working. Everything's there. And I don't have any T-Mobile crap on there whatsoever. So keep that in mind, because I know it's easy to go like, oh, I can go into a store and buy it directly, and oh, I can get a payment plan. But, remember, you get what you pay for, okay?
Well, remember, I mean, if you want to get that promotion that they're offering as well, up to $300 off, you have to buy it through T-Mobile, and you have to finance it. So you'll get even cheaper payments, but at the cost of, the software being a little bit different.
You bring up a good point, though. They have a really great offer. That's probably the exception that I would say consider maybe going to T-Mobile to buy the phone, is that you can return a whole bunch of old phones. If you look on my Twitter account, you'll see a photo that lists all the phones. I took a photo of this of the slide they had up on the screen at the event that list all the phones you can bring back to T-Mobile to get $300 off of your OnePlus phone. That includes every OnePlus phone ever made, including the OnePlus One, and a bunch of Galaxies, bunch of iPhones, bunch of Moto phones, HTC maybe? I don't remember. No, LG phones.
So this deal is actually $300 off, period. So it's not like an up to, like, oh, the older phones will be less of a trade-in value. It's no, all of these phones on this list that from the announcement are $300 off. And that even includes the OnePlus X that was, barely for sale.
The mid-range
also.
one. Yeah. So that's actually a pretty big deal. Like that I could see you kind of having to deal with unlock and the custom firmware, because I still think you're going to get updates pretty quickly, but it just gives me the willies, like this thing of like, oh, carrier firmware, no. Right? I don't know how you feel, Ricky, but it always pushes my buttons.
The general public probably won't care,
That's true.
They're going to see like, oh, there's this really cool phone I've never heard of, but it's going to be at the T-Mobile store. And that's the biggest deal of this whole partnership, is that the OnePlus 6T is going to be in physical T-Mobile stores where the general public will see it and say, oh, what's this? What is this? I've never heard of this company.
And And better yet, the Times Square store that we visited right after the event in New York, after the launch event, they turned the entire store into OnePlus, madness. And I know it's not going to last. I think it's only for 2 or 3 days. But to think of this, right? There wasn't a Galaxy or iPhone in sight. Like, that's a huge deal. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And from what I heard from talking to various people at the event, they're going to have even when the phones come back on the shelves, the competing phones, they're going to have the OnePlus kind of front and center in every store. That's a huge deal.
That is a really big deal. They're going to have their own display.
Yeah, right in the front.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember with the Nexus displays? When the Nexus 6, Motorola Nexus 6 was at T-Mobile.
It was so sad.
It was like tucked away in a corner against the other devices. Like, it's there if you want it.
So much sadness. But here's the thing, right? I want to talk about the rest of the phone because this OnePlus, so this T-Mobile thing is a huge deal. That's why we spend a lot of time talking about it. But to me, the thing that's more, like you said, average consumers really won't care too much. I agree. But one thing average consumers might care about is the lack of headphone jack.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I don't know if you're a headphone jack fan or if you kind of like Michael Fisher don't really care because you use Bluetooth. But I do care, and I do feel that it's a bit disappointing. But I've discovered a couple of things I want to share about that. The bad news is there is no headphone jack. The good news is that unlike some phones like the Pixel, the HTC phones, and let's see, I think those are the main big ones, and the Essential and the Razr. Unless all those phones, you don't need, it's not doing audio through, like it's also supporting analog audio through USB-C, not just digital audio. So basically, this is what's so confusing, Ricky, about USB-C audio. There's 2 standards that are part of the USB-C spec. One standard is the phone doesn't have any kind of analog audio other than the built-in mic and earpiece and maybe the mono or stereo speakers. And then if you want to plug some sort of headphone, earbud that's wired, you have to use an adapter, and that adapter actually has the DAC and the headphone amp in it. It's called a digital or active adapter, meaning it's basically a sound card. It's a USB sound card that's tiny that you plug in, and it gives you a DAC and an amp. And of course, as you can imagine, these things cost between $9 and $30, and they are going to be very small, so the sound quality is going to be highly limited by the quality of the components used in that thing. The DAC's going to be not generally very good, and the headphone amp's not going to be very powerful, and so you're kind of going to suffer in terms of audio performance. Now, not all of them are bad. The Essential one sounds pretty decent. The dongle, the Razr one's really great because it's expensive and bulkier, honestly, the Pixel one's not bad. The HTC dongle is kind of terrible. But there's an alternative to all this that Moto uses, that LeEco was using on their phones, that Huawei also uses, which is analog over USB-C, which means the DAC and the headphone amp are still in the phone, and you just have a passive, like a dumb dongle. The dongle is just a cable, right? An adapter cable. Right. And that is what OnePlus is doing. So the wonderful thing here is that the dongle that comes in the box, it's a nice little red dongle from OnePlus. It's cheap because there's nothing to it. There's just a cable with a connector at each end. And inside the phone is still the same really high quality DAC and headphone amp that they had in the OnePlus 6. And so you can, if you turn on the enhanced audio mode, which is not on by default in the setting, you immediately bring this to the level of quality of like, not quite as good as the LG Quad DAC, but much, much better than average. And so with adapter, since it's just passive, you can go ahead and enjoy your OnePlus 6T with a pair of wired headphones with decent performance. So yes, you lose the jack, but they did not compromise on really good built-in audio. So that's the thing to know. For those of you who are already used to our OnePlus and have experienced the OnePlus 5, 5T, and 6 had this really high or pretty high-end Dirac branded DAC and headphone amp, you can still benefit from that with the dongle that's supplied. And here's the best part. Amazon sells these dumb passive analog dongles for $2 to $3 all day long.
Nice.
Right? So it's much harder to find a digital dongle on Amazon, which is why so many people have a Pixel, lost their dongle, and we're like, oh, look, I can buy a dongle on Amazon for $3. And then they plug it in and nothing happens.
It doesn't work.
Right? So
Right.
that's what's broken about USB-C audio, and it's that you're breaking the compatibility. And we're going to talk about this in a second, but I want to bring it up right now since we're having a discussion on this USB-C audio madness. The new iPads announced yesterday, have USB-C now instead of Lightning, and they don't have a headphone jack. And it'll be interesting to see if Apple has supported analog or digital or both. And because their dongle might actually be pretty decent. The Lightning dongle that comes with the iPhone isn't too bad. And it's it's a digital dongle. So we'll see. It'll be, this is the thing. Every time somebody comes out with a new phone that doesn't have a headphone jack or a new tablet that doesn't have a headphone jack, it's like the lottery. It's like, is it USB-C analog? Is it USB-C digital? If it's digital, is the dongle in the box any good? Is there even a dongle in the box?
If there's even a dongle at all.
It's
right?
like, oh, what a nightmare, Ricky. So
yeah. I mean, it's really like a roulette when you're trying to figure out if you're someone who's really worried about these kinds of things. Generally, when it comes to headphone jacks, my opinion is, it's nice to have it there, particularly when I'm traveling. If I'm traveling on a plane, I'm trying to watch a video or listen to music, and just the convenience of being able to use a pair of headphones because I forgot my other pair.
Well, tell me what you think of that in-display fingerprint reader.
Okay, so I've been using the in-display fingerprint reader on the Huawei Mate 20 Pro. However, and that works. I thought it worked very well. I have not tested the OnePlus 6T's in-display fingerprint myself.
Right.
But actually, our review is up on GSMArena's website.
I will put it in the show notes, by the way.
Sure, yeah. It's up there. So there's also a video review on there. They had some, because they're over at the office in Europe, their experience was kind of lukewarm. Like, sometimes it would take a while to register. It sounded to me like it might be like a early software issue. Maybe it could be fixed with software, And I'm not sure exactly which kind of technology they used for this in-display fingerprint. Is it similar to Huawei's? Is it similar to Oppo's? Or is it just something completely different? I'm actually not sure what kind of technology they used on it.
I don't know either. All I know is that in terms of it's definitely optical. Like, there's the little light that shines underneath the display to read it, so it's using a camera system, because there are different systems. There's an ultrasonic one and a bunch. I think there's another one that uses like radar waves. Anyway, the point is, I have both the Mate 20 Pro and I've had the OnePlus 6T for about a week, and here's what I can tell you: they are both pretty much the same in my opinion. Okay. Meaning that they're both decently fast, as in about, like, I think OnePlus said 0.34 seconds. So
they said 0.3 something, yeah.
Yeah, 1/3 of a second. And honestly, that's roughly what the Mate 20 feels like to me, and I can look that up. I wouldn't be surprised if they use the same sensor. And I would say in terms of accuracy, I would say it's like 90%. You use the Mate 20. Every now and then it fails, but it's generally pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It works most of the time. Like, maybe like if I just wash my hands, my fingers are wet, then it won't read. But that's any fingerprint scanner, right?
Exactly. So here's the thing to me, is that it is a bit slower and a tiny little bit less accurate than what you used to. So in that sense, it's up to you to decide, is this an issue for you or not? I'll tell you what. I am finding now that I have my OnePlus 6T for a while, and because the phone feels and is shaped a lot like a OnePlus 6, and I'm used to a rear fingerprint reader on my Pixel 3 and on the OnePlus 6, I keep touching the camera in the back with my index finger to unlock the phone, and I forget that it's in the front, and then I have to say, it slows me down. I hate front fingerprint readers in the first place. I'm not a fan. I find that it's always awkward to reach in the front. I like the fact that with the rear fingerprint reader, you can reach for the phone in your pocket, touch the fingerprint reader while you're pulling out the phone, and by the time you look at it, it's unlocked, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas, otherwise you have to pull it, like aim for the right spot with your thumb in the front. And so the aim for the right spot in the front still exists, and it's worse than before, because in the past, fingerprint readers in the front, you had like a little indent, right? You could feel it. Mm-hmm. Here you have to physically look at your screen and know where the little spot is. It shows it to you on the screen. And then if you're in a dark room with somebody else, maybe that's sleeping, that thing is so freaking bright, Ricky. Like, it lights up the whole room. So it's a bit, honestly, I feel like I'm not sure that's progress. I think it's cool. The gimmick factor is high. The cool factor is high. I am not feeling it though. I think I'm happy it's there because it's not only is this the first phone in the US with an in-display fingerprint reader, but it is also, you know, it's OnePlus. They're trying to innovate. And this is innovative, right? For sure. I think it'll be much cooler when these things improve and are much faster and much more accurate. And when the entire bottom 1/3 of the screen you can touch. You know what I'm saying? There were some prototypes that Vivo showed, some prototypes of phones that had 1/3 of the bottom, like the bottom third of the screen, anywhere you touch there was a fingerprint reader. And that to me is the future. So then when we have that, I think I will not miss my back fingerprint reader. So to be honest with you, between the OnePlus 6 and 6T, because of the headphone jack and the fingerprint reader, I'm kind of leaning towards the OnePlus 6, except for one thing, and that's battery. So because they removed the headphone jack, and they had to remove the headphone jack in order to fit the vibration motor and the in-display fingerprint reader underneath the display in the bottom part there, they also had a bit of room left over, and they put a thicker battery in there because the phone is a little bit thicker than the OnePlus 6. And so instead of 3,300 milliamp hour, it's 3,700 milliamp hour. And to me, I think don't decide to buy the OnePlus 6T. I mean, besides the T-Mobile and the use on Verizon part, don't decide to buy the 6T because of the fingerprint reader or the smaller notch, which we're going to talk about in a second, or the, headphone jack or any of that stuff. Buy it maybe because of the battery difference, because more battery is always better, right?
Oh, yeah. And manufacturers are having a hard time understanding that.
No kidding.
Some manufacturers are.
And I want to say that because it's a little thicker, the camera pod protrudes less, and it does feel a little better in hand than the 6. But honestly, it's a minor thing. I don't find battery life on the 6 to be a big issue. So I would probably tend to pick the 6 because I prefer the fingerprint reader in the back and the headphone jack. But that doesn't work on Verizon. It's not sold by T-Mobile, and it doesn't have the cool factor of the fingerprint reader in the front. And speaking of cool factor, teardrop notch instead of regular notch, which is, again, a first for the US market and very cool looking. I mean, this is more display than the 6. The bezel at the bottom is even smaller, and, it's a gorgeous OLED. So, I mean, it's 1080p still, but you can't go wrong with this phone in terms of display. One sacrifice was made though, Ricky, and there's no more indicator light in the top by the earpiece, showing you like notifications. Because the notch is so small, they only have 3 things in there. They have the front camera, they have a what's it called?
A
sensor. Your sensor to detect whether you're taking a call, like proximity, yeah?
Proximity sensor. Mm-hmm.
And then they have a slit right above that in the frame of the unit for the earpiece. So the earpiece is actually not in the display anymore at all. Kind of like the Essential, but it's a beautiful design. It's nice. My only gripe maybe, and I don't want you guys, and I say guys, I mean folks listening, to think that I don't like the OnePlus 6T. I think it's awesome, but I have a few niggles. The lack of notification light, lack of headphone jacks, are little things that bug me. And then, but I do think the fingerprint reader is cool. I think the notch is cool, but I also feel like the screen has rounded corners where the roundness is way too big. Like, the radius is way too big. It cuts more of the screen off than the 6 did. And it feels kind of like more like a bar of soap now, the phone, when you look at it. Like it's all round. It's like a Ford Taurus from the 90s. It's really weird. Okay. Whereas I think the 6 had a bit more of a square feel, and I like phones that look a little more squarish. I don't know. It's weird.
Okay.
Do you have like design choices there? Design preferences that do you feel this is something you notice? Is it a difference for you?
Actually, I don't know. I can't say that I've noticed that specifically down to the design and the radius of the display. I don't know. Actually, I tend to like phones that are easier to hold. I don't like how the Mate 20 Pro is held. Like the Samsung Edge, like the Samsung S9, Note 9, Mate 20 Pro, because they have the curved edges, I don't like how it feels holding it because the bezel is right. It's almost sharp because the frame is so thin around the screen and the back glass and the front glass. It's less to hold on to. So yeah, it's a little bit less uncomfortable. I guess that's my preference. I'm not. I don't prefer that.
Well, you'll like the 6T. Because I think it feels better in the hand than the 6, for sure. Yeah, because it's a little thicker
phone feels better to me, definitely, yes.
And so compare them side by side. You probably still have a 6 floating around. Put them next to each other and look at the radius on the screen corners. It's a little weird. Like they went kind of overboard. It's like you cut off a chunk of that corner, guys. Where's my corner of my screen anymore? It's weird. But remember, you have to understand that, OnePlus is part of BBK, like Oppo and Vivo. And so that display is probably the same display that's in one of the Vivo phones, like the R17 or something. So, keep that in mind. Camera, let's talk about that because you're a camera person. You do professional videos. So what are your thoughts on that? They added some software features. It's the same camera as the 6. They added some software features that are coming back like retroactively to the 6, which is really good news for you. So that's the other reason. You should potentially consider a 6 simply because you're really not getting much in terms of, other than battery size, much difference, right? The Nightscape is pretty interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
Were you able to finally test the Nightscape on the units?
Yeah, it comes with it. I used it, and it's really quite good. Like, I mean, it's basically like night mode on the Mate 20 Pro or P20 Pro, or P20 or Mate 20. It's also like the new, what's it called? Night Vision or whatever, the thing on Pixel 3. Night Sight. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pixel 3 XL, which doesn't officially exist yet, but there's an APK you can download for your Pixel 3 that enables that. Which I've been using. And so basically it's this thing where it does a long exposure by adding multiple photos and aligning them in software so that there's no blur. And yeah, it does help a lot. But here's the bottom line for me on the OnePlus 6 and 6T cameras, since they're the same, is that these are the first cameras from OnePlus that I feel are good enough and competitive enough to have in a phone that can be called a flagship phone. They're, but they're still at the bottom end of the flagship quality. Like,
sure,
the low light without the Nightscape mode doesn't quite live up to, say, a Galaxy or an iPhone or a Pixel or a Mate. And that's a little disappointing, but I have to say they've made huge progress. And honestly, you will not be disappointed in terms of imaging with this phone. 90% of you out there.
I was very surprised with the OnePlus. So I remember I ordered the 5T.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to return it anyway. But I was returning it, and I didn't like the camera on this 5T. They hyped the camera. They hyped the camera on that phone so much. And then they didn't deliver, I thought. But they didn't do that. They didn't hype the camera on the OnePlus 6. But the OnePlus 6, I thought, took much better shots than the 5 or the 5T did.
I agree, 100%.
My only gripe with the camera on the OnePlus 6, in this case the 6T as well, because they're a similar camera, is the selfie camera. I thought the selfie camera on the OnePlus 6 was not very good. It didn't capture as much. It was kind of soft for me.
I don't think that's changed.
Okay, I don't think so either. No.
So, I mean, look, it's for the price. By the way, the price is interesting. It's a little more than the 6 was, obviously. The 6 was $529 for the base model, which was 6 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes. This is now $549, but you get 128 gigabyte and 6 gigs of RAM. So you get double the storage. So in a sense, I think it's pretty competitive still. The highest price version, $256, 8 gigs is $629, and then there's a $579 one in the middle somewhere, which is 8 gigs, 128 gig. But the bottom line is, I think it's competitive, absolutely, as always. And so, yeah, I think the camera, honestly, is not going to be an issue for most people. It's finally at a point, as you said, with the 6, where, it's decent. I can live with it. But it's true, when you start comparing it to the others today, it's still falling short. And let's hope OnePlus does even better next time. I mean, what can you say for $549? Come on.
I'm actually going to add on to what you said about now that you're mentioning pricing. The T-Mobile version, I looked at the little plaque on the tables at the T-Mobile store, and it said $580.
$579. Because they sell the 8 gigabyte 128 gig version.
Oh, because it's 8 gigabyte.
Yeah. They don't sell the 128, the base one.
Okay.
They sell the mid-range one, which is $579 on OnePlus's site as well.
Oh, it's the same price.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
Okay, so they don't sell the base one. Okay, no. Got it. I made a mistake.
And I think they have the two colors, but I don't think they have a bigger size version. I think that's all you can get there.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
I'm not 100% sure. You might be able to get the 8-256 higher end one. I'm not sure, but I think definitely you can't get the base 128 version. And I mean 6 gigs of RAM is way plenty enough, right?
Yeah. Even 6 gigs and 128, which is what actually the base model Mate 20 Pro has also.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's plenty, even 6 gigs.
I mean, honestly, you're not going to miss out. Cool. Well, listen, I will try to do a video review of the 6T at some point. I'm just a bit swamped right now. But, you kind of got our review, I think, here in the show. Like, things I like is it's thicker, it's better in hand, it's got a cool factor with a fingerprint reader, the notch is nice and small. It's got that new nightscape mode for the camera, which is a low light mode, which is a handheld low light, which is great. It's a OnePlus. It's available on T-Mo. It works on Verizon. These are the pluses. The negatives for me are no headphone jack, no notification light. Oh, sorry. One of the big pluses is the battery, bigger battery, 3700.
Yes.
The minuses are no headphone jack, no notification light. There's weird rounded corners that I find are weird. Fingerprint reader in the front, just as much as it's an advantage and a cool factor, it's a solid drawback because it's a little slower, less reliable, and I don't like the position of it. And then, the camera is good, but not great. And that's it in a nutshell. I mean, you can't go wrong, though, with this phone. Like, honestly, after using the OnePlus 6 for several months, I was like, really, do you need more phone than that? I don't think so. So the OnePlus 6T is, in some ways, more phone. So there you go.
It's a very high value to, I forgot what I was going to say. It's like a value versus experience.
Yes.
Bang for buck, I guess, would be the best way to put it. I think it's the best bang for buck, honestly, for smartphones right now.
Especially in the US, because you got T-Mobile, and you have Verizon support now, which is super important. Sure, it's LTE only, but LTE on Verizon is everywhere, so I really don't think you're going to mind. Yeah. And the best part with Verizon, if you're a Verizon customer, you could potentially buy a second line for like $5 a month or something and get like a cheap burner phone like a Moto G6 that has CDMA support in case you are in the boonies and you still need to use the phone, So
or you can get a Palm.
Oh God, the Palm. Does that have CDMA? I think that's just LTE as well.
It probably is. But that's a whole different conversation.
Look, I finally saw one at in New York. One of the folks, and I'm not going to say who, showed me their phone. I can't tell you anything because it's under embargo. But and I want to respect my friends. So more on the next podcast. I'm trying to get a review unit, but all I have to say is, holy crap, it's small. That's all. Like the pictures don't do it justice. And that's all I'm going to say before I get in trouble. Before the giant laser beam in the sky comes and hits me. What was I going to say? Let's move on and quickly talk about the Hydogen One, the red phone. Here's my take. I just want to say a quick thing, and I'll let you you can put your take. So he said, she said. It was hyped to death. It took forever to ship. It turns out that this great, crazy 4view technology is really just 3D. It looks exactly like the Evo 3D did back in the day.
Oh, man.
And basically, so it captures photos and videos in 3D and it plays them back on a display in 3D. And it's a newer display technology than the Evo. It's obviously with the processing power we have today, much better at processing the videos and photos it takes in 3D, all that. But ultimately, You're paying $1,300 for a modern interpretation of an Evo 3D. It's so gimmicky, I cannot begin to explain how gimmicky it is. And on top of that, the phone sucks. Meaning it's beautiful and beefy and thick and heavy, and you can throw at somebody and kill them, and all that, machined aluminum. It's Red, right? Red makes really amazing cameras, but, they're reliable, solid, well-made. But none of that matters if the phone itself is kind of crap. And the display, when you use it as a normal 2D display, doesn't even hold a candle to like a Moto G6, okay? And then on top of that, it's big and bulky, and it costs a lot of money, and it's got a Snapdragon 835 from like 2 years ago in there, because they announced the thing with the 835 and they shipped it a year and a half later than 835. It's a total disaster. And if you look at the reviews, oh my God, The Verge gave it 3 out of 10. Like, that's how bad it is, folks. And that's my take.
So what's the actual resolution on it?
It's Quad HD.
Oh, it's Quad HD. Okay, it's Quad HD, and it's okay. I'm just looking now here at this.
Pretty sure
the notes. Yeah. I mean, it's just so I understand.
What
that
is your impression?
I'm sorry.
What is your impression? So
I understand that there's some camera. Like, okay, so Red makes cameras. The whole point of this phone was to show us the camera experience.
Yeah.
Is that's what I think so.
It's Evo 3D. There's nothing. The camera takes okay pictures, but it doesn't even remotely, it doesn't even come close to a Mate 20 Pro or a Pixel 3 in terms of normal imaging.
Wow. So the camera is just a dud then.
It's a total dud. It does 3D, okay? It does 3D really well because it's able to do 3D at 4K and everything. Like, it's cool, but like, the display sucks. The processor is not a flagship processor. The thing costs $1,300. Yes, it's built like a tank, but like, it doesn't excuse the fact that as a phone, it sucks. And, I know it'll be interesting to see once they start, if they ever launch these modules they'll be talking about, because the whole thing is modular. It's got like a contact array in the back, like the Moto mod system. And it'll be interesting if they come up with like a big, Scarlett sensor or something they stick on the back there. Then maybe I could see it. But then, like, what do? You have to take that off the phone every time you want to use it as a phone. Does it just become a dumb HDMI monitor for your Red sensor at that point? Gosh. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't get it. Like, what are you thinking here, Red?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess we'd have to figure out, or they'd have to figure out. Or I don't know, look back on Red, when they first started making cameras, I don't know the whole story, but when they started making cameras, I believe that people were like, oh, they're crazy, they don't know what they're doing.
But then they delivered.
Right. So can we expect a similar thing to happen from this
But product? No, because they've delivered and it's crap, and like everybody agrees. And I played with it. I was very neutral, right? Until I touched one at the OnePlus event. Actually, I played with 2 different ones, and I was like, are you kidding me? This is it? Like, it was terrible, Ricky, really bad.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know what? Red did it. They promised they would do it. They delivered a product.
They delivered what they said they would deliver. They just lied. They just lied about this 4V thing. They said it was like the next coming. It was a holographic.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not.
No.
It's 3D.
I'll give you that.
Like, they hyped something that we already had with the Evo 3D. That's all I'm saying.
From like 2011 or 2012?
Correct,
maybe?
11,
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to show us something like that, it better blow our minds, not just...
And like, I think they overhyped it. Honestly, if they hadn't overhyped it and they said, look, we're working on a phone, it's going to be part of the ecosystem, we don't expect too many people to buy it. It's going to add connectivity to our Red cameras. There'll be modules with Scarlett sensors and whatever. And oh, by the way, it does 3D video and stills. And it's a pretty high-end phone in terms of specs. I think we would have been okay with that. But no, hype, and then they deliver something that way backwards in terms of spec. Sure, they delivered on the build quality and the beefiness and the manufacturing, the materials, all the stuff you expect from Red. But this is not the camera world where you buy a camera and use it for a decade, right? A cinema camera. This is the consumer world where that phone is obsolete. Like, before they launched it, that phone was obsolete because they weren't able to update it to an 845. Like, that's what I'm talking about. And they might not see it that way, but, when they hyped it so much, so many people including like people who really love red, like the folks at the Virgin, Marquez and stuff, you know, they were like really on board. And then they disappoint us like this. This is not good. You know, they got to set expectations appropriately.
Yeah. I mean, those, is there even any update on or timeline for those modular? No,
and honestly,
nothing?
considering the thing is going to be a dud, I don't even think if I were red, I would spend any money on that, you know? Maybe repurpose this, as I said, as a fancy HDMI monitor. Like having a smart device that's part of the core of your, like touchscreen-based smart device that's part of the core of your camera control. I think that's a really good idea. Maybe repurpose it as that and have LTE connectivity on it is also a really good idea.
Maybe repurpose it as a red camera accessory.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Basically, an LTE-enabled smart display for monitoring, camera adjustments, with touch controls. You know, really beefy, really cool. Like absolutely. But don't position it as a phone, because a phone means that it's always on you. You don't have to like that's the problem with mods. You have to remove all the crap off of it to really use it as a phone, right? Unless you have a really thin battery mod, right? So
yeah.
Anyway, let's talk Apple, because we got about 15 minutes left. And I know you're not a Mac user, but I wanted your impressions. You saw the news. What's your takeaway? Just kind of more Apple stuff, whatever? Or does anything stand out in the announcement for you?
Okay, so my honest take on this event, I don't follow Mac. I don't have a Mac. I've never extensively used a Mac computer. So to me, this announcement is, you know, updating their old products and still keeping the base models low so that you tack on accessories and pay more. And that's the best way to recap this event, in my opinion, I think.
But that's true of Apple. That's true of Apple in general.
But that's just Apple. That's Apple being Apple.
Yeah. What do you think of the iPads? I mean, that's a little bit. Maybe you use iOS from time to time as a phone person. You kind of have to, right? You probably have an iPhone floating around, so iPad might maybe ring a bell with you a little more.
Okay, yes. So actually, iPad is probably what the most I have to say about. So there's no more home button. So they've removed the Touch ID from the iPad, and they've pretty much gone Face Unlock. And this sounds to me, you know, with the announcement of the new MacBook Air having Touch ID, and then, you know, the iPad having Face ID. Face ID is going to remain a mobile product, you know, a mobile method of unlocking, and then Touch ID would remain on the laptops, because they could very well put Touch ID in a MacBook. Face ID in a MacBook. Yeah,
that's probably next. You know, Apple tends to do that. They milk their technology for a long time.
As long as they can. Yep. Until they're out of components.
That's right.
And then, yeah. So the other big deal for me was USB-C on an iPad. That's a huge deal.
I mean, you can plug 4K displays into the iPad now. That's computer grade stuff here. Yeah. I mean, look, I want to make it clear as an aside that I know that some of you out there use iPad Pros as your main creative device because you're illustrators and graphic designers, and I get it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, Harry McCracken, one of the most famous tech journalists of all time, uses an iPad as his primary writing tool with a keyboard, mind you, a Logitech keyboard. Every time I see him, he's got a Logitech keyboard on that thing. And he always has the latest iPad. And I'm sure, you know, that it's perfectly fine. For me, it isn't, because I don't know, I like a desktop experience, especially for browsing the web. But I get it. Like, I think it's legit. And I honestly, when I look at this new iPad, all I can see is USB-C, no bezels almost, no buttons, and sadly no headphone jack, by the way. But 5mm thick. This is Star Trek come true to life. Like, this is amazing to me. And I know it's iOS, it's a little limited in my opinion in terms of an experience, but I have to give Apple kudos. The prices obviously are a little steep, but that's Apple. And remember, these are pro products. These are not your base iPad. So I think this is delivering. And I know my friends who are musicians and DJs love the iPad as a musical creation tool. It has some of the best music apps on the planet. Some people even don't use a MacBook anymore to create audio and to DJ, because an iPad just does the trick, right? So I mean, there is a huge population of people who are going to benefit from this. So I'm stoked about this iPad. I think it's great.
I really like the new design.
It's beautiful, right?
Yeah, how they flattened it and made it almost kind of squared off, but they still have the round edges. It kind of goes in line with some of their MacBook Pro. Is that how the MacBook Pro profile looks?
It's interesting. It's more MacBook Pro than it is iPhone. Like the iPhone feels, and obviously it needs to have rounded edges because it needs to be held in hand all the time. Mm-hmm. And I get it, and I think for that it feels good. But again, I like more squarish things. So, I find the iPhone's a little too round for me. Although it's design-wise a little less frumpy than the round corners on the 6T, which are really weird to me. I don't know why. But the iPad, I think you're right. It strikes a chord for me. It's kind of like it's got roundness, but it's just the right amount, and it's just in the right places, and it does just look like something, like just one slab of display in your hand.
Yeah. I mean, that's what an iPad is. It actually, if you remember the first, I believe it was the first iPad, it had the same design. The edges were kind of squared off, but the back wasn't flat. The back was a little bit rounded.
That's right.
So that, it would easier to hold from the back.
And they need to put the battery somewhere.
Exactly. As well, yeah.
I mean, I think it's cool. And 5 millimeters. They're going to have a lot of people bending this thing in half by accident by sitting on it and stuff. Oh boy!
Don't drop it. It's going to slide in between people's car seats. And
it's going to be Apple Care Central. That's why you buy Apple Care. You pay more Apple tax.
So I have a question for you, Miriam, actually. Now that the iPad Pro has USB-C, do you think the next iPhone will have USB-C?
Yes.
You think so? Yes.
I'm calling it. There's two things that's going to happen next year. Either the iPhone will have no ports at all. No.
That idea just, oh my gosh. That idea
They've been doing that. They've been wanting to do that forever. Remember, Google was trying to do the Pixel 2 or one of the Pixels back then with no ports. I mean, this is the holy grail for Apple is no buttons, no ports, right? So I see one or two things happening next year. Three things. They stick with Lightning for one more generation. They go no port after that. Or they switch to USB-C. And they stick with USB-C for a few generations until they can do the no port.
I think they're going to stick with Lightning for one more generation.
I think maybe one more time.
Yeah.
But here's the crazy thing, right? Like if you're a Mac user, if you're an Apple ecosystem user, just for a second, like imagine this scenario. You have an iPhone XS that you just bought, and you have wired headphones, so you use a Lightning adapter for that. Mm-hmm. You just bought the new iPad Pro, and you use the $9 Apple USB-C headphone adapter for that. And you have a MacBook, any MacBook, and you use the native headphone jack that's still built in to the MacBook for that. Holy, like, talk about a split personality company here.
So you need 3 different headphones.
Yeah, well, you need 2
wired
adapters
headphones.
For regular 3.5 millimeter headphones. Yes.
So the MacBook has a standard 3.5.
Yep, you're good to go.
And the iPad has USB-C, and the iPhone still has Lightning. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, right. And so, wait a second. If you have Lightning earbuds,
hold on. Do you know what would solve this problem?
What?
The AirPods. That's why people buy the AirPods.
That's right, the AirPods. Good call there, Ricky. The AirPods are the darlings of the Mac user world. Yeah, there you go.
Reason.
But I do think it's interesting that if you have an iPhone that came with the Lightning earbuds, right? You can't use the Lightning earbuds with your Mac or with your iPad Pro 2018. But same, if you buy a pair of USB-C headphones, like maybe the Bullets USB-C that OnePlus launched at the same time as 6T, you can't use those with your iPhone, but you can use them with your iPad, and you can actually use them with you'll be able to use them with your MacBook because it has USB-C. Mm-hmm. See how weird this is? This is like, it's like another dimension. Steve Jobs would have never let that fly. Like, this is crazy to me.
It's just overlapping in all different and inconvenient ways.
Wow.
I was actually going to ask you something related to. I forgot what it was. I'm sorry. If you had something, you can go ahead. I don't remember what I was going to say.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Macs a little bit because I'm a big Mac fan and Mac user. That's the thing. See, I'm not. A lot of people think you hate Apple, and it's not true.
Oh,
and
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. The last thing I wanted to talk about the iPad Pro. What charger does it come with?
It comes with a USB-C charger, and I think it's it's like
the
a 30 watt,
watt
or something. It's
Okay.
like their 29 watt one.
Okay, because they could not pull that 5-watt BS
No.
anymore.
I hope not. But they don't have a 5-watt USB-C charger. So
Well, not
the
USB-C,
base model
exactly.
they sell for USB-C is a 29 watt.
Yeah, I remember this was a topic of conversation, and this is the last we can talk about this because we have to move on to the Macs. This reminds me of the conversation when the iPad Pro first came out, and it still came with a 5-watt Lightning charger, a USB charger.
Yeah.
And it was just taking hours and hours and hours to charge the thing up, unless you bought this other faster charging solution.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a long ongoing story that we don't have to get into.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, honestly, but I assume that they did create another charger just for this. That would be, that they would bundle the 29 watt charger they already make. Could be wrong, but we'll see. Anyway, speaking of USB-C and laptops and Macs, let's talk about the new MacBook Air. So I'm excited about this because I have a 12-inch MacBook, which is like the in terms of performance and specs, the lowest spec MacBook today on the scale. You make choices and compromises. The reason I have a 12-inch MacBook is portability. It's super thin and light. It is only 2 pounds heavy, and it is got a Retina display, which is beautiful. And one single USB port, a Type-C, and a headphone jack. That's all you get, and you get you can spec it up pretty high. Mine is an 8 gig of RAM, which is pretty decent for a Mac, 8 gigs of RAM. And it's got a 512 gig SSD. So, and mine is 3.5 years old. So that's 3.5 years ago. That was what I chose. And at the time, it was already a little underpowered because of the Core M processor. And they haven't really updated this machine. The old Air was very outdated in terms of PC specs, and everybody was expecting Apple to refresh it yesterday, and they sure did, and that's good news. But we weren't sure if they were going to refresh it or combine the two models in one, right? And we weren't sure if they were going to retire the Air brand because they retired the iPod Air brand. So I thought personally they were going to make a hybrid mixture between the two in terms of design and specs, and that it was just going to be called MacBook and replace the one I have and have a slightly bigger screen. And so in a way, that's exactly what happened, but it didn't replace my Mac. My Mac is still on the store available, but in terms of aesthetics and everything, it's exactly what I thought. And they didn't retire the Air brand. So the MacBook Air that was launched yesterday is basically much smaller, much thinner, much lighter than the previous MacBook Air 13. Still has a 13.3-inch screen, but much smaller bezels. It's now Retina, which is the big deal because all the old Airs were not Retina, and you really could see the pixels. It was really terrible. More importantly, it has an 8th-gen Intel processor in there, which means that performance-wise, it's not going to be a dog. So basically, my wish has been fulfilled. Oh, and it has 2 USB-C ports that are also Thunderbolt 3. So that's really what I'm going to upgrade to, and the only concern I have is that the base SKU is 8 gigabytes of RAM, which, as I said, is fine for a Mac, but 128 gig of storage is a little low. That's $11.99. The old the old MacBook Air started at $9.99, so $200 more, but you get a much better machine, honestly. So again, don't look at Mac prices to compare them with PCs because the PC world is a different place, and there's great PCs that cost a lot less and Chromebooks that cost even less. But if you're a Mac user, I think the Air is going to be a killer. I think it's going to be super popular. I'm going to certainly upgrade to one as soon as I can afford it. And I'm going to get one that's 512 gigs, so I'm going to pay a little extra for storage because it's all soldered on, I think. And there you go. That's, in a nutshell, what they announced yesterday in terms of MacBook, and I'm super stoked about it.
There's a couple things, actually, also with the MacBooks. There's there's Touch ID now.
Oh, right.
In the power button.
So they didn't do with the touch bar because I'm not a big fan of touch bar, and so I'm glad they didn't do the touch bar. And they replaced the power button with a Touch ID sensor, which I think is also a power button, and that's actually a big deal because I like the idea of being able to log in with my fingerprint rather than typing in a password every time, and that's been resolved. So thanks for pointing that out. I kind of forgot, but it's definitely there. And
there's also
stuff.
the 3rd generation butterfly keyboard.
That was
Do you have any opinions?
So
I'm sorry?
sorry.
I was going to say, do you have any opinions on the butterfly keyboard?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my
issues that it
favorite.
had?
So I have the second generation butterfly keyboard on my MacBook, and honestly, that's the one that supposedly had problems. I haven't had any issues with mine in 3.5 years. So
That's
and
great.
despite eating a lot of food while using my computer, so there's a lot of crumbs getting in there, and that's the crumbs was the problem that was often killing those keyboards. So I'm okay. I have to say that it takes a bit of getting used to. Once you're used to it, you don't even think about it. Honestly, I don't think it's a bad keyboard, but I have to admit, like Mate 10 Pro, the MateBook 10 Pro, you know, MateBook X Pro from Huawei, or like some of the Dell laptops and HP laptops I've used, or my favorite, the Chrome, the Pixelbook from Google from last year. I have to admit, those keyboards to me are way better. And I kind of regret that Apple has switched to this butterfly mechanism. Even though it makes the keyboards thinner, I don't think it's as good of a typing experience as before. And the third gen, I've used it briefly, is on the new MacBook Pros. It's also on the new MacBook Pros that were launched about 6 months ago, refreshed 6 months ago. It is definitely an improvement. Supposedly it's more dust resistant, and they fixed some of the issues with second gen. So, you know, I'm not going to be upset about it because I'm used to it. And they fixed some of the reliability issues. But I do wish Apple would go back to more regular scissor keyboards with a bit more key travel. So that is, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, there's also, the keyboard. I mean, the keyboard experience is really important on a laptop.
But so is the trackpad experience, and this has one of the biggest trackpads on any Mac. So
yes,
you know,
trackpad with force touch as well,
and it's force touch. Like all the my trackpad from my 3.5-year-old MacBook has force touch, and it is actually my computer is the first one they launched that feature on, and honestly, it's as reliable today as it was day one, and it's kind of honestly feels so great, and it's adjustable. You can adjust the level of haptic. I think very few companies do touchpads as well as Apple trackpads. And I think, you know, nobody's done haptic touchpads yet. So, I mean, the Chrome, the Pixelbook that I love has, you know, basically a springboard kind of trackpad, you know, where it's the whole thing is clickable, but it's not, it's actually physically clicking, whereas it's not haptic. So, I mean, that's the second best trackpad I've ever used is my Pixelbook, I would say, and some of the new, like the MateBook 10 Pro X Pro. Sorry, the MateBook X Pro is got a really great trackpad as well for a Windows machine. So I mean, there are lots of Windows boxes out there, PCs that have great trackpads today, but nobody does, like, they all click physically. So nobody has done the haptic, which is really interesting to me. That, you know, we're 3.5 years into this haptic thing for Apple now, and we're not seeing PC makers do it yet.
They probably don't. I mean, they don't see it.
You don't need it. Honestly, you don't need it.
Exactly.
Like it's like, you know, it doesn't bring anything other than the adjustability of the clicking. You could make it more clicky or less clicky in software. Other than that, it really doesn't bring much to the table.
The only thing I can think of is just making that pad thinner by not having it.
It is thinner. Yeah, it is definitely thinner.
Press, yeah.
So
yeah, it's for the sake of components and
it's pressure
space.
Sensitive. So on some apps, it gives you a better, like you can, if you're clicking on a scroll bar, right? If you click harder, it scrolls faster.
Oh, okay.
Like you get some pressure sensitive features in there that are kind of nice. So that could be a thing. Yeah, some people like it because of that, but I honestly don't think that's a seller. Like, to me, what the big revolution was with Apple was that they make trackpads really smooth and two-finger scrolling really nice, and all that stuff that we take for granted today. They kind of invented the glass trackpad, you know, that was finished in etching so that it feels really good to touch, and the clickiness being just right with the older trackpads that were physically clicking. All of this the PC world has adopted now and perfected as well. And I love that all PCs feel so good now because of it. Because, you know, for a long time there, PC trackpads were such a mess. Man. If you were an Apple user, like, it was just like night and day. But now the gap is much narrower. Like Microsoft makes really great laptops, the Surface laptop, and their trackpads are phenomenal as well. So, you know, I think that doesn't matter. But I'm kind of happy to see the size of that trackpad on the Air. I think it's a nice size trackpad.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm seeing here that the highest spec MacBook Air is $2,600.
Yeah.
1.5 terabytes of storage, 16 gigs of RAM, but the same Core i5 CPU.
Yeah, I think it's just higher clock rate. That's all.
Okay, so they do raise the clock rate.
Yeah, I think it's like up to 4 gigahertz or something, in its burst mode or whatever. Yeah, I don't know exactly. I haven't looked at the specs because I wouldn't spec one that high. Like you'd buy a MacBook Pro.
I mean, that's if you max it out completely.
You would buy a MacBook Pro. But speaking of maxing out, we should wrap up. But I want to talk about the one last thing they announced that I think is really significant, which is not a mobile device. But it's a significant thing, I think, because I have a thing for small computers. The Mac Mini finally got a refresh. And what a refresh it is. It's not, the Mac Mini was always positioned as kind of like a switcher Mac. You know, if you're a PC user, you wanted to switch and you really wanted the cheapest Mac computer you could buy, and you already had a keyboard and mouse because of your old PC, you could buy a Mac Mini for like $499 was the initial price on that thing, and you had the Mac experience for $499, right? That was the thing like 10 years ago when it came out, or more than 10 years ago. And now, you know, they let it kind of go stale, but they repositioned it at this event as kind of like a creative pro-ish device. Because the specs go up to an eye-popping $4,199. You can start at $799 for the base model, and you can spec one out, get this, with like 64 gigs of RAM, 2 terabytes of storage, and like a 6-core 8th gen non-mobile processor. It's like become a creator's dream come true. And there's a lot of people who use these in rack mounts, in server farms, and et cetera, et cetera. They're really happy to finally get an updated machine. So I just want to bring it out there. I think it's pretty cool. Even the $799 model is going to be a killer because it's got an 8th gen core processor in there from Intel that's not a mobile processor for once, and it's got upgradability is back. The last Mac Mini they made was all soldered on the board, like the MacBooks. On the MacBook, it made sense because you wanted thin and light, but on a desktop machine, you want some upgradability. They have standard DIMM slots in there for upgrading the RAM, a standard M2, whatever it is called, socket for the SSD. So to me, that's huge. Like, I know it's not mobile, and I don't want to dwell on it, but what are your thoughts?
This thing looks like it could be a small powerhouse, and I think that you know that a lot of people already use Mac specifically in audio technicians,
video editing,
stage DJing, even editing. Yeah. To be able to bring this machine on mobile, or to bring this machine with you, to get your full desktop with you. And I think, because like you said, the first Mac Mini was more aimed at this is the cheap way to get a Mac,
Correct. Yeah.
But I feel like it's not the same now. It's a different positioning of the Mac Mini, and it's more like a versatile mini computer. Like I'm just repeating myself now, but
no, you're right. And I think the form factor is really nice. It's small. It's got no power brick. Like it plugs directly into the wall. It's got gigabit, and in fact, the higher end model has 10 gigabit Ethernet. Like I mean, you're talking some crazy features. It's got 4 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports in the back, 4, and it's got 2 USB-A 3.0 ports, and then it has HDMI, and then you get gigabit Ethernet or 10 gigabit Ethernet. Like, the ports on that thing are bonkers, and that's exactly what creative people want.
There's even an audio jack on it.
Yeah. You could stick this in your backpack, find a monitor and keyboard somewhere, and you've got like something that blows away a MacBook Pro, basically, in your pocket. And it's quiet, and it doesn't get too hot. You can plug like a disk array, like a Thunderbolt, RAID array to it for video editing. I mean, it's a freaking serious thing,
Yeah.
I'm excited. Sorry. And remember, you can run Windows on any Mac. Remember that, folks, right? Like, that's the other thing. Like, I like Windows 10. I have a bunch of Windows 10 boxes. I'm not like all Mac all the time. I just like the Mac OS because it's based on Unix, and I'm a big I'm a former developer. I used to make video games, and I used to work on a lot of different OSs and platforms.
I didn't know that. That's good. Yeah. Learning something from you here on the podcast.
I worked on video games for 15 years as a developer. Wow. So for me, I like having the command line, having like Unix under the box and under the covers, and so that's why I like Mac OS. But I'm also a big fan of Windows. I think Windows 10 is really great, and it's come a long way, and Microsoft's done some really good work, and I could totally live with a Windows box as my daily machine. So don't call me a hater, and don't pigeonhole me, right? Like I'm not an iOS fan, but I'm a Mac fan. It's weird. Anyway, Well, listen, we should wrap it up. I want you to take a few minutes or whatever time you want, to tell people where they can find your work on the internet, where they can find you on social, all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I work for GSMArena.com. So over at GSMArena.com, if you don't know already, we do keep the most extensive database of phone specs.
You guys save my life all the time. Like, to give you an example, when I do a phone review, like an unboxing, I don't know the specs by heart. I just go to GSM Arena and I look it up and I'm like, oh, there it is. Ricky says this. Good to go.
Well, for the record, I don't say I don't.
No, I know you don't. I'm just saying it sounds good, right?
But I myself, GSM Arena, work for GSM Arena. I use GSM Arena as well. So we have our specs there. We also do have news there. I write news almost every day, and our YouTube channel as well at GSM Arena, where we do reviews of the phones as well, and then we have our very extensive, comprehensive written reviews on our website as well. But a lot of the videos that I do are mostly hands-on at events. So if you find me on YouTube, you can see me there doing hands-on with some of the other phones that we've seen earlier this year. And I think that's pretty much it. Right now I'm working on the Mate 20 Pro video review, so that will be out hopefully by this weekend. It's been taking me a little bit longer than usual, just with all the traveling and other stuff I had to do.
Yeah, it's been crazy.
I'm also on Twitter and I'm on Instagram at Ricky V Tech. That's Ricky VTECH. Come hang out, come leave comments, whatever. I'm down to talk to people, have a conversation, ask me questions, anything. What else? And
Instagram?
Instagram. Yeah, it's the same handle
same
actually.
As your Twitter.
And Twitter,
cool.
Yes. Yeah, same thing.
All right, well, before I tell you where you can find me, and most of you know, let me quickly plug our sponsor, Audible. So Audible is really the place to go if you like audiobooks. And, people say, well, why would I listen to audiobooks when I can read a book? And I'm like, yeah, some situations where you can't read a book. You are driving a car. You are a security guard working a night shift. Whatever it is, Audible's got you covered. And I really think it's a great platform. If you haven't already joined and become a member, you have a great opportunity to do that on the podcast. There's going to be a link in the show notes, and I'm going to share that link with you right now here. If you follow through that link, you can become an Audible subscriber, and you will help the podcast in the process. The link is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And remember, audible.com, it's your source for all audiobooks, and I want to thank them for sponsoring the show. You guys know, you folks, everyone, know where to find me. I'm Tank Girl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character Tank Girl, but drop the vowels. Back in the 90s, I came up with that handle because somebody else had written out the full name, and I was like, damn it. So I kind of invented the Flickr without the vowel thing before Flickr did. I'm proud of myself for that. That's also my Instagram handle. And I make videos on YouTube just for fun to kind of complement the podcast so you can see the devices I talk about. If you want to see a OnePlus 6T up close and personal, watch my unboxing, which will be linked in the show notes. The channel is youtube.com/Miriam Joire. That's my full name spelled out, Miriam with a Y. And finally, you can also subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, mobiletechpodcast.com. I'm on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Overcast, Stitcher, Slacker, TuneIn Radio. Basically everywhere, just Google for Mobile Tech Podcast, search for that. And if you can't find it because there's a lot of keyword that it touches, maybe add Tank Girl to that, my handle, TNKGRL, and you'll definitely find me then. Ricky, thanks for being on the show. That was super awesome. We had a good time.
Damn girl, you're all over with the podcasts on
I know, right?
On Pocket Casts and everything.
Yeah, you gotta promote yourself. That's how it goes.
You gotta cover all the
But
bases.
now you know what it's like. It's very casual. We have a fun conversation.
Yeah.
We get distracted in tangents, all kinds of stuff. It's a good time.
Yes. Thank you so much, Miriam, for having me on the show. It was great. I had a great time.
Absolutely. And we'll get you back on sometime in the next year or so. And stay tuned for another show next week, folks. All right. I'll talk to you later. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.